Welcome back to the deep dive. It's become almost a constant thing we hear,
Yeah.
right? This phrase, the mental health crisis among teens in the United States.
Yeah, everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Politicians, the media, parents, educators, everyone's talking about it. And, it feels like we're always looking for answers.
And those answers often point inwards, don't they? Like stress management or coping skills, individual stuff.
Right. But today, we're going to take a deep dive into a perspective that really pushes back on that whole mainstream idea. Our mission here is to explore a viewpoint that goes beyond, the surface stuff and suggest something maybe deeper, more fundamental is going on.
Okay.
We're diving into excerpts from Capitalism, the root of teen stress. Now, this source, it offers a very specific, pretty critical look at the whole issue. And just a quick heads up, like always here on the Deep Dive, we're here to understand and, unpack the ideas in this specific source you've shared. We're not taking sides, not endorsing any particular viewpoint. We're just doing what we do best, giving you a clear, unbiased look at the arguments, the details in the material itself.
Getting those key insights out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Extracting those impactful nuggets. Okay, so let's get into this.
Well, what's interesting right off the bat is how this source frames it. It doesn't just say it's complex. It argues these struggles are an inevitable outcome.
Inevitable outcome of what?
Of
Exactly.
broader societal structures. It's saying it's not about individual kids failing or even just bad policies here and there.
Mhm.
It's foundational. It's how society is set up.
Wow, okay, so that really flips the script, doesn't it?
Completely.
From what's wrong with our kids to maybe what's wrong with the world we've put them in.
Mm-hmm.
So the source's main argument then is pretty stark. It's saying the teen mental health crisis is this inevitable outcome of a society built on capitalist exploitation, relentless competition, and a culture that values profit over humanity.
That's the core claim. It's basically saying the system itself is the root cause.
Not just a factor, but the root cause.
Okay.
That's a really big claim to start with.
It is, and it connects that idea immediately to the whole land of opportunity story, the American dream narrative.
Right.
The source argues that for kids today, it feels less like opportunity and more like, well, it says, the land of anxiety, depression, and despair.
Oof.
Mhm.
How does it back that up? How does it say that happens?
Well, it argues that from really young, kids are kind of trained not to imagine, freedom or creativity, but to get ready for what it calls the brutal machinery of the market.
Trained.
Through everything, really. Societal messages, how schools are structured, how we even define success. It suggests kids are sort of pushed towards these specific economic roles, almost like programming.
Okay, so it's not just feelings. It's about what they're actively, maybe subconsciously being taught to be.
Yeah.
This idea of being trained for the market, it still sounds a bit abstract. Does the source give examples? Like, what does that look like day to day for a teenager?
It gets pretty specific there. It paints this picture where childhood becomes less about discovery and more about production.
Production, like what?
Like grades, achievements, college applications, standardized tests, all that stuff. The key idea is that childhood itself changes. It's less about exploring and more about preparing to be economically useful.
Mm.
It uses this really striking image. Every smile hides a stopwatch. Every classroom hides a factory.
Wow. So even just learning and growing gets measured, evaluated for future market value.
That's the implication. That pressure starts super early.
And that leads straight into the education system, I guess. The source claims it's not designed to liberate young minds, but to domesticate them.
Exactly. Not liberation, but preparation for a role in the system. It sees schools as kind of preconditioning kids.
So not just flawed, but maybe intentionally designed that way, according to the source.
That's the argument. It describes students being crammed into overcrowded classrooms, force-fed meaningless data, and ranked like cattle at an auction.
Ranked like cattle. Harsh.
Yeah, and the insight isn't just that conditions are bad, it's about the message that sends. The source says the message kids internalize is, you are only worth as much as your productivity.
So your value isn't inherent, it's conditional, based on what you produce.
Right. Linking self-worth directly to output, making you feel like a, commodity in training.
And the result of this culture of ranking and sorting, the source calls it the schoolyard version of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
That competition gets embedded early on. It's not just grades, it's being pitted against each other, always comparing.
Yeah, the idea that your value comes from being better than the next person. It says the winners rise, the losers disappear.
Which has to lead to stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
Burnout, feeling inadequate.
Definitely. And the source says even the winners can feel empty because their worth was always
Yeah.
conditional, always external.
And this ramps up with college admissions.
Oh, yeah. The source calls that the college admissions meat grinder. It specifically flags this as a point where depression and anxiety spike.
The meat grinder.
Okay.
Why? Just the pressure.
Not just that. It's the money side, too. The source calls the whole financial aspect predatory.
How so?
Families taking on crushing debt just to compete. And the source claims corporations are actively profiting from this whole stressful process.
Like who?
It mentions things like student loans, overpriced textbooks, and standardized test monopolies,
Yeah.
saying whole industries are built around, well, extracting wealth from this pressure cooker. The system isn't just broken, it's exploitative, according to this view.
Okay, so we've got this picture of kids being pushed through school towards college, this production line.
Right.
But what happens after? When they step into early adulthood, does the stress just stop?
Not according to this source. It argues the stress just changes shape. It follows them into work and especially into their relationship with debt.
Okay, let's talk about work first. What's the source's take there?
It's pretty critical again. It points out how minimum wage jobs pay poverty wages, but they're often framed as building character.
The character building argument for low pay.
Exactly. The source sees that as reframing exploitation as personal growth. Kind of insidious.
Anything else on work?
Yeah, it also calls out unpaid internships, glorified as necessary stepping stones. But the source argues they just normalize the idea that young people should work for free.
Setting the stage for being undervalued later.
That's the idea, establishing that their labor isn't worth fair pay right from the start.
So work is often exploitation disguised as opportunity. And then there's debt. You mentioned debt.
Oh, debt is huge in this analysis. Devastating, really. The source claims that by 18, the system has young people by the throat.
How?
Credit card offers flooding their mailboxes, banks pushing student accounts, loan papers with, fine print designed to enslave them for decades.
Wow. Enslave them?
Yeah. The insight here is that debt isn't presented as just a choice, but almost like a default setting, an unavoidable condition of becoming an adult in this system.
So not just a tool, but a trap?
That's how the source frames it. It uses this really powerful phrase. They are born into debt before they even have a chance to breathe. Basically saying it limits their freedom right out of the gate.
Okay, so the picture is school trains you, work potentially exploits you, and debt traps you. It's a stressful cycle. But then the source adds what it calls the cruelest twist. What's that?
The twist is that the same system creating all this stress then turns around and tries to sell you the cure.
Like an arsonist selling fire extinguishers.
Pretty much. It completes a kind of cycle.
What examples does it give of this? Selling the cure.
Well, it points to things like tech companies push wellness apps, individual tech solutions for what the source sees as huge collective problems.
Right. Mindfulness apps while the structure remains.
Exactly. Or corporations sponsor mental health days, while maybe overworking parents or destabilizing the communities those kids live in. The source sees hypocrisy there. And maybe the most ironic one, schools hire consultants to tell kids to practice mindfulness, all while cutting art, music, and counseling budgets.
So superficial fixes, instead of addressing the root causes or even cutting the things that might genuinely help.
That's the argument. The source calls these efforts a grotesque parody of care, a distraction, really. Managing symptoms, keeping the status quo.
And he uses really strong language here, calling it psychological gaslighting on a mass scale. Why gaslighting? That's a heavy term.
It argues it's gaslighting because the blame gets subtly shifted back onto the individual.
Oh.
The message becomes, you're not resilient enough, or you just need to manage your stress better. Download this app, take that wellness break.
Right, it's your fault you feel bad, not the system's fault.
Exactly. It deflects from the source's main point, that the system itself, capitalism in this view, is the disease. By making it about individual coping, it stops people questioning the structures causing the stress. It's you, not us. Deeply manipulative, according to the source.
And this ties into the whole American myth, right? The story we tell ourselves.
Yeah, the source really goes after that narrative, Stress is the price of ambition. Work hard and you'll succeed. That whole thing.
But the source says kids aren't buying it anymore.
It argues they aren't stupid they see this. They're not living in a bubble. They see their parents drowning in medical bills, maybe older siblings crushed by student debt.
They see the reality around them.
Right. Neighbors getting evicted by landlords. These aren't just news stories. They're potentially their lives or the lives of people they know.
And social media plays a role here, too.
The source argues it does by bombarding them with curated illusions of happiness they can never achieve, making the gap between the promise and reality even wider.
So the core insight is that this generation sees a huge disconnect
Right.
between the story they're told and what they actually witness.
Yeah, the source says the disconnect is so big, the myth just crumbles for them.
And the source concludes this part pretty bluntly, saying teens know the future they were promised is a lie, and describes them as trapped in a system designed to keep them anxious, compliant, and obedient. Anxiety as a tool of control, almost.
That's the dark picture it paints. Profound disillusionment.
No. Okay, so if the source diagnoses the problem as the system itself, capitalism, what's the proposed solution? It talks about moving beyond shallow reforms to rip the mask off the system itself.
Well, first, it makes this really provocative claim that stress isn't just a side effect of modern life.
What is it then?
It argues stress is the lifeblood of American capitalism.
The lifeblood. How does that work?
The argument is that the constant pressure to perform, to compete, to consume is what keeps the whole economic machine going. It keeps the wheels turning.
So the striving generates stress, but the striving is necessary for the system.
That's the logic. Without that constant pressure, that anxiety to get ahead, the source suggests the machine would grind to a halt. So stress isn't just a bug, it's a feature, a core functional part.
Wow. That's quite a take, that the anxiety is actually required.
Perversely, yes, according to this perspective.
Which leads us to solutions. If stress is the lifeblood, how does the source suggest we, change things? What are the proposals for dismantling the conditions that produce this suffering?
Given that diagnosis, the solutions offered are pretty fundamental, not small tweaks. Systemic changes aimed at true liberation, not just wellness.
Okay, like what specifically?
All right, it lists several key things. First, end the stranglehold of student debt. Just eliminate it.
Okay.
Second, guarantee free, quality education that nurtures creativity, not conformity, directly challenging that factory model we talked about.
Makes sense. What else?
Third, abolish predatory credit practices targeting the young, trying to stop that debt cycle before it starts. Fourth, provide universal health care, including robust mental health services, free from corporate profit motives, treating healthcare, mental and physical, as a right, not a business.
Universal health care, including mental health. Got it.
And finally, maybe the biggest one, redistribute wealth so that children are not raised in poverty while billionaires hoard unimaginable fortunes. A direct challenge to wealth inequality.
So these are really fundamental shifts aimed right at the mechanisms of competition and exploitation the source identified.
Exactly. They're structural responses to what it sees as structural problems.
Well, that was definitely a deep dive into one very specific and highly critical perspective on teen mental health.
It certainly is critical.
Yeah. So just to recap quickly.
Yeah.
The core argument we explored from this source material is that American capitalism itself is presented as the fundamental root of teen stress. It shifts the focus away from just individual coping skills towards these larger systemic causes. And again, this deep dive was purely an exploration of that specific viewpoint from the material you provided, offering one stark explanation for a crisis many of us are seeing. It definitely challenges us to look beyond the individual kid and consider the bigger picture, the structural forces.
And, it really does leave you with a big question, doesn't it? When we think about what helps young people, what truly counts as effective care and support,
Right.
how much of that is about individual resilience, fixing the person, and how much maybe lies beyond that? How much is tied up in the actual structures, the values of the society we've built around them?
That's a really important question. Shifting the focus from just the individual to the environment, the system itself. What does real support look like at that level?
It prompts you to think much broader than maybe the immediate, obvious solutions, thinking about the world we're actually creating for them.
Absolutely. A powerful thought to leave with. Thank you for sharing your sources and joining us for this deep dive today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for listening. Until next time, keep thinking critically.